Hello, and welcome to Roundtables Live, an open discussion run by the Movies and Filmmaking Discord. Today's host is Frankenstein, or Frankie, and the topic is animation. If you'd like to check us out on Discord, go to discord.io/movies. And if you're interested in hosting a Roundtables episode yourself, please contact a staff member for more information. If you're already on our Discord and would like to support us, please check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/mamdiscord. We cannot do this without our Patreons. Anyway, let's get on with the show.
Hello guys, welcome to Roundtables Live. It's great to see you all. Today, as Drew just told us, we're going to be talking about animation, which is really interesting. Animation is a very broad subject, and so we want to try and get as much around the whole spectrum as we can. So I thought that to start with, we could go back some years to the traditional animation. And don't worry, we're going to be around. We're going to be talking about stop motion. We're going to be talking about modern animation, 3D animation, as well as the traditional cartoon animation. So we're going to try and get around as much as we can. So just hold on, and we'll try and talk about the things that you love too. So first, we're going to be talking about traditional animation. So this is like the golden era of the Disney, for example. We have Bambi and so on. So first, I'd like you to message in the text channel, what are your favorite traditional animation movies? So this is like, you know, it goes all the way up to Lion King, for example. So exactly, we've got Pinocchio, we got Mulan. Oh, the Iron Giant, that's great. We've got several the Iron Giant, Alice in Wonderland, Isle of Dogs. It's a little bit later, but that's a good one, Jeff. I like the original Robin Hood as well, with the fox. That's a great movie. So if anyone wants to contribute to the voice here, don't be scared, even though we are recording. Just DM me, and I'll allow you to speak. So, for example, if anyone wants to mention what do they love about their favorite movie or their favorite traditional animation movie, just DM me right now, and I'll let you say a few words here. All right, Kevin Spacey, you're first.
So how about the live action? I know that we're going back to traditional animation, but what about the kind of hybrid live action animation that was kind of featured, like in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, kind of later in the year.
Those things don't work out though.
That's a very good question. We can definitely conclude that in this if you want, because I love the Roger Rabbit as well.
And if you want to go even further back, Mary Poppins featured an animated sequence. So
that's
technically,
true. Yeah. Definitely. If you want to talk about that in this,
I would say
yeah, you could talk about that now. That's for sure. So we got Vic. Here we go. First up is Mantis, though. Mantis, what do you want to just say a few words about your traditional movie?
My movie is is Alice in Wonderland. I think it shows the capabilities, a lot of it, of Alice in Wonderland, like all the things that happen, and I do think that not Alice in Wonderland, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, it is the first one, and I think it's really the first animated film that could show that not live action things could make you feel emotions, and it could show emotions too. So yeah.
That's good, man. All right, Vic, you're up. What's your movie?
Pinocchio. Let's speak about Pinocchio. Pinocchio is one of the most visually gorgeous films ever made. Don't at me. My fucking lord, this thing is insane. Every single frame of animation is absolutely unbelievable, and it takes such a simple, coming of age story and tells it in such a fascinating and unique way, completely impossible and unimaginable in any other form than animation. And Walt Disney, my dude, that man is my boy.
And here I just posted a picture of the Pinocchio movie, if you can see it, guys. There you go. That's great. All right, let's see who we got here. So Kevin Spacey wants to talk about Tom and Jerry. You can talk about that, man.
This is more of a sentiment. I know it's more of a TV show than a movie, but there have been plenty of animated feature films by the Tom and Jerry crew. But it's really more of a childhood sentiment to me because I guess it kind of established. I don't think it was the first kind of slapstick, violent Looney Tunes sort of stuff, but I think it really set a precedent. What do you guys think?
All right, let's just see if anyone has something to add to that. And you can just DM me if you have something to add. So, Vic, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Tom and Jerry is really interesting when it comes to animation as well, because Tom and Jerry originally started out as short films that started before features in cinemas, but then it was one of the first shows really to really embrace the medium of TV, and I think that's like just really cool how. Because it really delved into TV and became almost exclusively TV, which really helped animations run within TV, especially in the earlier years of animation.
Mm. Definitely. I can just give you a little fact here. The first animated movie was actually made in 1906, which is many years ago, and it was not animation like we see today, obviously, but still, it was an art form in the movie industry that came really early, and it's really been developing immensely throughout the whole industry and throughout the years. So, which is why we can have so many different opinions on animation and what we think is best. All right, so Jeff, do you want to talk about Futurama? Because we can, even though it's modern, I think we'll come back to it later. But you can just mention why you love it so much. Yeah, I'll read for you. Don't worry. So Jeff is going to be writing it down. I'll read it for him. So Jeff really likes Futurama because he thinks it introduced high-level parody, and it mixed sci-fi and gave us characters that have rarely been seen on screen before. Oh, that's a fair point. All right, guys. So we want to dive in a little bit in the discussion here. So obviously, you guys can have mixing views, and some of you are going to think something is great and think something else is not that great. So I'd love to get a discussion going.
So if we're talking about classic animation here,
Mm-hmm.
we don't really see a lot of classic animated movies. What are people's opinions about where that's kind of going? I mean, stop motion is around too, and it seems like everything's 3D animated. What would happen with kind of that type of art form today?
Yeah, Mantis, what do you have to say to Jude here?
I think a lot of it was the uprising of like 3D animation, and the less and less uh 2D animation. Like Princess and the Frog wasn't that good. I didn't do that good. And the other animation, I think, and the 3D animation rose. Like Bolt, Pixar also rose a lot in the animation, and I think that as technology, we want to make it more realistic, and I think that's what the audience, a lot of the audience, wants to see now.
I think, like for example, like we've had, I think people just wanted to innovate. Like for example, last year we had our first entirely painted film, right? And then we had stuff like Animalisa or what was the other, Isle of Dogs, right? That are just advancing in stop motion technology. So I think the like you said, Drew, the classical animation form, it maybe felt too restrictive for some artists who felt that it was really hard to do, who saw like the
Yeah.
potential for 3D animation and was like, yeah, let's go for this instead, or even hybrid earlier, like the intro to Roger Rabbit, like right, like the like how he runs around the room. You couldn't do that before, so I think people just they felt that the new innovation allowed them to experiment more.
Oh, definitely. I'm gonna add on this one as well. Like I think if you look at Lion King, for example, which is a mix between more the traditional drawn cartoon and then 3D animation. Like if you look at the horse scene with the bulls, it's like a really strong scene, and you can see why they used 3D there, because it gives something else to a scene, it gives more depth. And I think you're right, Kevin, that there is like a certain, I mean, there's a certain way that the creators, that the artists can, uh, you know, push the limits and experiment more. All right, Gaskari, you're up.
Yeah, like I kind of am slightly involved in the animation industry, and I've got to have the fortune to speak to a lot of industry professionals and stuff like that. Like in the UK, we have Aardman Studios, which is a very British animation house, and they do stop motion and stuff like that. And yeah, it's interesting how the industry shifted in the past few years, where there's still a lot of traditional animation, almost as much as there was before, but it's taken completely different forms. So it's all short form work, it's all commercials, it's all like short films and all that stuff. And people still love it, but it's just in short supply now, like it's in short kind of doses. And I think, but when it comes to mass market appeal, then yeah, it seems to have like gone by the wayside. But the good thing is though is that a lot of 3D animations like Zootopia, for one, they still use a lot of traditional animation techniques and looks. They really tried to keep that alive, so they involve a lot of traditional animators still, and they're still the most valuable skill set to get. But yeah, the look is definitely changing, and that's really interesting.
Mm.
Do you think that we're ever gonna get a fully animated movie from Disney again? Like traditional animation?
I don't know. I kind of doubt it personally, but I don't know. It's hard to say.
I mean, you see the remaking all the originals live action, like with the Jungle Book. So I think they're all just gonna be live action CGI kind of.
Exactly, and they're about to do the same thing with the Lion King, you know. So we're seeing that transfer from old Disney to new Disney, and it's very strange because it's a very, very different form of animation now.
Mm. So Jeff, you said you disagreed. I'm curious to see what you're disagreeing with. Oh, he's back there. Hey, River Phoenix. We're talking about animation. So here you can. The thing we've been talking about is, especially right now, it's the old Disney versus the new Disney. Like we're even moving into live action at this point, which is really interesting. And so, what's your thoughts about that?
I don't really know, really. I mean, Disney's always been successful. They've got Pixar, you know, they got like Oscar buzz all the time. So, I mean, they're just gonna keep doing what they're gonna do. There's, I don't know. I'm a big fan of movies that take a lot of risks, and Disney isn't one of them. So I feel like, what works, they'll stick with it. If it's broken, don't fix it. Well, sorry, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
All right, man.
So if they're gonna keep doing live action adaptations of like princess movies, and if they're gonna keep doing like 3D, CGI movies, that's what they're gonna keep on doing.
I think one of the most interesting thing and the biggest difference really between modern and older Disney is really that with old Disney was all about risk taking. Because the entire concept of making a feature-length film, an animated feature-length film in itself, was already something that nobody thought would ever be possible. And then Walt Disney decided to say, you know what, let's do this. This is probably the biggest risk that he would ever take, or anybody really in the industry would ever take. And he created an entire industry behind it, thanks to taking that risk. And I think one of the main things really also when it comes to old Disney and the new Disney is how the biggest difference between them is definitely the risk taking, but as well as old Disney always had a voice behind every single one of the film. The entire company had a leader which had such a unique voice to the rest of the industry, which was Walt Disney. While current Disney doesn't necessarily have that, they're trying to captivate on what they used to be, the magic of what they used to be, while the old Disney had this one view, and it was Walt Disney's. That was probably a bit convoluted, but nonetheless.
I think I like what your point, but I think that 2D animation with Disney, it's never been at like everyone says, oh, it was only 2D animation. But back in the day, even when there was no coloring, like Walt Disney did a thing called Alice in Wonderland, not the Alice in Wonderland, but it was a live action movie mixed with it was it was basically like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, except it wasn't as advanced, and it was just her in an animated thing. So I don't think that it was always classic. His history is very it does experiments. So I think that there will be 2D animation, as in like it'll go in like maybe in like the 2040s. It'll be like go back like a time like they'll remember like a whole period.
I also really like the point that Will made about Pixar, because I feel like Pixar was like this huge pivotal point in Disney's history where a lot of animation changed in that respect. And now we see things like Illumination and everything, because everyone is so interested in that type of animation now, and we've just kind of moved away a lot from 2D. Someone had mentioned in VC, like maybe for the 100th anniversary they'll do it, and that would be super cool to just see something really classic again. But like Ascari said, it just doesn't feel like that's the direction they're going in anymore. It's really weird. So I guess
Yeah.
I would love to. I mean, like my favorite, we were talking about it earlier. My favorite is The Fox and the Hound. I love it so much because it captures this emotion and friendship and melancholy really well. And you still see that with the new animation, but it's just it feels different emotively and the way it's portrayed visually. Um, I think it's been done well in movies like Up, I guess. But more of these Pixar movies, they're more fun than they are emotive, in my opinion. And maybe that's just me. It may be attributed to the animation style as well. Like Toy Story that we just posted. That Toy Story was a lot of fun, but I don't see that didn't really impact me as much as um older, you know, older animation. I don't know why that is. It was just yeah.
Have you guys discussed the topic of wait, well, technically we did when we were talking about like experimentation with movies, but like has anybody like given any examples of like their favorite like animation movies that are like experimental in some way? It can be like story wise or like animation wise.
We're gonna save that question. I think there's someone having a comment for what Fen said, and also Kevin is gonna be up. So I'm just gonna remember your question, okay?
We're saving that for later. Okay.
Oh yeah, no worries, man.
I've always wondered. We've had 2D and 3D, and this sounds really stupid, but is it possible to go maybe beyond, like, in video, not like 4-dimensional, but like maybe, I don't know, make things interesting, maybe 2D animate like shapes, or like these basic polygonal objects, and then
like more of like an abstract,
I suppose so.
kind of animation. I mean, it's possible in my opinion, but like I assume like a story has to have characters, like the most important thing in a movie is its characters. Otherwise, it'll just be like an art piece, an art video. So I think that it's definitely possible. Loving Vincent, they did something like in the style of like one of Van Gogh's paintings. His style, not like one of his styles. Like he has one specific style. But I don't know a lot about art, but I guess like what do you think, like when you say like polygonal shapes and everything, I think of an artist with like who tampers with a lot of straight lines, like sharp edges. So I think Picasso in some way. Like, do you think I feel like you could like take that abstract form and translate that into say like a biopic about Picasso? I mean, like it's the first thing that popped up into my head. It's not very original because Loving Vincent already did it. But I mean, there are like a lot of ways that animators can play with their medium. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think people need to experiment more with animation as much as they did when traditional came out. Am I wrong? Am I just not looking at the experimental, like not mainstream, but the experimental market enough and seeing the and am I wrong about the lack of animated movies in experimental, like modern experimental cinema?
All right, guys. So Fen mentioned just earlier about emotion in modern animation, and we have a lot of people who wants to comment on that as well. So I think we're going to let that have a chance now, and Vic is going to be first.
Wait, what?
You had a comment to Fen, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, the comment I had to Fen is that when it comes to like animation and stuff like that, is that I think the biggest problem really with the industry currently when it comes to animation is that everybody's really trying to make a profit out of animation. But the thing with animation that always worked for it, but also kind of never worked for it, was the fact that animation isn't really profitable. Like look at, for example, or like animation where they put a lot of work into it and they try to make it as high as quality as possible. It isn't very much profitable because we have, for example, think about the Japanese industry. The most people that work within the anime industry, for example, they don't necessarily work because they want to earn a lot of money, but because they actually love the art of it. And that's usually, it seems, where the most great animation comes from creators that doesn't necessarily want to make a profit out of it, but they seem to rather really care about the actual art of it. I don't know. It's just that it's just animation has never really been that profitable before the to an extent before like recent years really.
Yeah, that's just depressing, you know, because I think about like all of the old Disney films that I loved growing up and having on VHS and just watching over and over again. Like me and my mom's favorite was Beauty and the Beast. We could watch it every day and we would. But now, I mean, what you're talking about, like this money grabbing, I've seen it. Like I've worked like working at movie theaters, so many kids flocking to see what was it, the new Despicable Me movie, and it was absolute garbage. And like, what was it, Cars 3? Like, there's just all these things that they're terrible films that don't have that heart, that don't have that. Yeah, and emoji movie stuff like this. Like, it's not. I don't know. Maybe it's because it was never profitable, and now because it's become profitable, they've moved in this direction. It's this weird dilemma, and I kind of hate it because I want good Disney and or good animation in general. And I think we might get it this year. I think that Incredibles 2 will probably be amazing. It's been like 10 years. Finding Dory was really good. So there are very few exceptions, but they're too few and far between from such a grand scope of animated films, especially in Disney's respect, that it gets kind of old.
I gotta say something after you're done.
I'm done.
Well, am I the only one who thought that Finding Dory wasn't as good when he said that?
Yeah, it was boring.
Yes,
I
you
never
are.
watched that.
It's good.
I thought it was a little lackluster. I know we're not getting to specific films, but you mentioned Incredibles 2 and Finding Dory. I don't know, some of the films that Pixar has come out with recently aren't amazing. Like at first I thought that Inside Out was like one of my favorite animated movies, but after rewatching it after a while, it was good. I wouldn't say that they're like amazing like Toy Story 1 and 2 and 3. I don't know. I'm a little skeptical about Pixar right now. That's just me. I don't know if anyone else kind of feels the same.
No,
I feel the
agree.
same.
Because I don't know. I actually haven't watched any, like the last Pixar movie I've actually watched is Inside Out. So I actually haven't watched anything in 2 years. But I feel like somehow like Pixar movies are just so unappealing to me now. So I feel like, I guess prior to this, I was still like I've always enjoyed Pixar films as a kid, and now I feel like it's kind of manipulative in a way, that like the way they can toy with your emotions with like such like simple plot devices. I sound like a conspiracy theorist, but like personally, like I wouldn't say they're formulaic. All their films are like very unique in like very different ways. But like at the same time, I feel like their films have like similar thematic elements that all seem generic in a way. You know, they're too manipulative. Emotions, Pixar strength lies in their in the way they play with their emotions, and now it's
Yeah.
I'm going off on a tangent. I don't know where I'm going, so I'm just gonna stop.
I was gonna
okay.
say something.
Giskari can go first, and then Coda, you can join in afterwards. It's gonna be about the same.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of agree with the sentiment. Like, I think I've really noticed that with modern Pixar films is that I can get really emotional when I watch them. Like with Inside Out, like I cried my eyes out at that. But then like the next day, I'm thinking that was kind of really manipulative, like you said. Like it's just kind of hitting the very shallow notes, and like it's totally not like the more long-lasting kind of heartfelt narratives you get in the older animations and stuff like that. And I mean, I was kind of going to go back to, you know, the classic animations and stuff with, like, you know, how Don Bluth was like a big like rival for Disney, and he kind of tackled kind of. I was recently watched The Secret of Nim again, and like it's just interesting how the main character in that is kind of like a middle-aged female character that's a widow, and it's her dealing with the loss of her husband and then getting thrown into this whole thing. It's like that's a really interesting narrative to have in an animated film for kids, and it even tackles, you know, animal testing and all that stuff, and it's really heavy subject matter. And you just would not see that anymore these days, like in mainstream animations. And it's usually just really, I don't know, just really easy kind of coloring in by numbers kind of emotions that are easy to kind of predict. And yeah, I think it's kind of a shame. But then you also wonder, well, you know, Don Bluth isn't the one who's the massive animation studio right now. It's Disney that won out, and there's a reason for that.
Okay, so one of the points I was going to make that I think like we haven't touched upon a little bit was like we've all been kind of been talking about Pixar and other things, but I feel like probably one of the most manipulative businesses in animation is actually what is called adult animation. In other words, like so stuff like you see on television. No, like The Simpsons, Family Guy, stuff like that. If you actually look at like a lot of data as well, like about 92% of American adult animation is all comedy. Like the only ones that really come to mind that are actually action based for an adult audience are things like Spawn, the animated series, or Eon Flux, or things like that. But oftentimes in other countries, like say Japan or other places, a lot of times there's whole types of genres and other things for adults. And the other thing is, it would be fine if things like The Simpsons were for adults and things like that. But over the years, it's been so carbon copied and created that it's ultimately become where it was once like a critique of pop culture and satire of it. It ultimately became part of it and manipulated its audiences for almost 30 years now. So there's an interesting thing where it's like in terms of stuff that's not just for kids, but also like stuff even for adults has been like manipulated in people to buy products and to buy DVDs and stuff like that.
All right, who's got something to say to that? Just jump in.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a interesting narrative. I was trying to think of other animated shows that appeal to adults, but I'm only thinking of Family Guy, Rick and Morty, and I mean, I was thinking of Archer for an action type thing. American Dad, yeah, but that's also more. That's leaning towards comedy too. So
yeah, they're all comedy.
Yeah.
I forget what I'll come up with the name later, soon. But there is one a movie about animation, and it deals with the drug use. It's like LSD. Let me get the title.
Yeah, but someone mentioned Clone Wars. That's still for kids, the initial target audience.
Yep, that aired on Cartoon Network, and they fully marketed it for kids, so that wouldn't count.
Well, I think TV animation and film animation is like very different, and like the reason television, like the purpose of television is to create like a long sustaining form of entertainment, right? So it naturally, like comedy would be, comedy like The Simpsons, Family Guy, Futurama, rest in peace. But yeah, would be a television show,
Yeah, but think about it though, with television, right? Like television should still have the same standard as film. That's why you have stuff like Netflix now, where they're actually like investing in like film quality type shows. But even then, most of their animation is, what was that show with like the one, not BoJack, but it was the other one that was really bad, where like they had like the hormone monster or something.
BoJack wasn't bad.
Big Mouth, Big Mouth.
Yeah, like
I
why
watched
do we
that.
have to
Oh
why do we
yeah.
have to have stuff like that, you know?
It was pretty bad. It kind of like being a kid. It kind of and going into that part of my time. It did kind of represent it a little bit, but other than that, it was horrible. It was disgusting, and I don't think that it should be greenlighted for a second season. And it should be taken off Netflix because they shouldn't have that imagery anywhere.
I enjoyed Big Mouth.
So
yeah,
did
I was the
I.
opposite.
So all the people who likes Big Mouth, yeah, I guess Kari could start. So just explain what the opposite here. So what do you think about it?
All I
Oh,
was
wait.
really saying was that real quick. I was just saying that I'm not saying like certain shows like that are terrible, but what I was just saying that why is it so difficult for companies to invest in action-oriented animation for adults in the States? That's all.
Anime.
I mean, it's because it's safer, you know? Like comedy is a lot safer. Um compared to wait, where am I going? Hold on. It's safer, but when you compare it to Japan, they have like a different sentiment. Like animes are limited series in a way. You know, they have a set of seasons, whereas like in the U.S. they have to keep it running. Only like a few TV shows, I would say, like actually succeed when they're kept like running for a long time. So you know, look at Breaking Bad. That they managed to end that season on a good note, but Dexter, on the other hand, wasn't. But with comedy, you can just keep it running, right? And nobody's calling like television animation like intellectual or anything besides maybe like Rick and Morty fans or some shit, you know. So I think that when it comes to television, there's more entertainment value in it than film. I think I don't know if like you guys, you know, if you guys are promoting like animation as an artistic form. I think, you know, it can be, but like when it comes to television, nobody's gonna watch like an intellectual comedy show. Like well you're talking about action. Nobody's gonna watch an action show because you already have like um thriller dramas and action shows on television where there's like already like realistic gore and like uninhibited violence. So
Game of Thrones, yeah.
the animation, like
What do you mean with action oriented?
well, previously, I forget which one of you brought out like the brought up like action animation, you know, Spawn, the animated series, and you know, we got into this discussion about how like comedy, like animation dominates television in the
What about
US.
shows like? Oh, sorry.
No, continue.
But,
I
but
actually
those
don't know.
series, those
Wait.
series and movies have action. That often, yeah, there are comedies, but they do have action in it. Maybe it's not
Yeah,
the main focus. They don't
but
identify as
we're
action. But
no. Okay, listen to me. The thing is, we're talking about like an action centric animation TV show, right? We're not talking about a comedy show with action. Action isn't its main focus.
you mean like a Mad Max kind of thing with animation?
Like a hypothetical TV show, like sure, yeah, I guess. I mean,
Like Samurai Jack?
Samurai Jack's still for kids. I guess
Yeah.
not the new one. Right?
Mm.
The new one's a lot
yeah,
more.
the newest one was only built on nostalgia.
Yeah.
To be honest,
It
it was good. I enjoyed it. It was just for the kids that grew up on Samurai Jack.
Since we're talking about movies or animation that kind of appeals to the adult audience that aren't comedies, I think that anime is kind of the place for that. Kind of their stories and what they revolve around can be a lot more brutal than what they show in traditional animation. Like, United States type thing. Like, I don't.
Castlevania
Yeah,
is a good one.
I actually
Anime.
haven't watched that, so I can't comment. But
Uh,
yeah, some of the animated films that come out from Japan are just really great stories, and their animation is amazing. So I don't know, maybe that's kind of where the serious adult animation movies are going, because we don't really get that from
Yeah.
just Adult Swim and stuff.
Yeah, okay. So I honestly, because if you think about action TV shows, that's not animated. Let's think of like, for example, let's look at Daredevil or something. I love the action scenes in Daredevil, and why don't we have something animated um, in a TV show that has this kind of action, this kind of intensity?
But
Why don't you think we're
yeah,
seeing
in anime
this?
they do. Sorry, I'm not trying to be
But
like
the
a
other
weeb,
thing that's
but
Yeah, no,
But the other thing is too, right? Because everyone always wants to say, "Oh, but just watch anime." Here's the thing: anime in general didn't really start becoming popular in the West until like the past 20 years, with like the release of films like Ghost in the Shell and other things like that. So
The old one.
oftentimes, like it was very much not available. And what I'm saying is like I don't. I feel like just saying that, oh, just go over here. I feel like you should be able to expect something more from like Hollywood and other people to like actually want to be
yeah,
creative, but they don't.
I also think something, especially when it comes to the action genre, like I think live action is always going to have the edge on that because part of the thrill is the tangibility of real people doing action, and it's always never going to be quite the same. It could be beautiful, like when you watch an animation, like Samurai Jack and all that stuff. It can be very artistic, but I definitely think it's more in the line of just art and like painting and stuff like that. That's what the niceness of the visuals there. Whereas with like an action, there's so much more going on. It's much more easier to achieve that way as well. That visceral kind of thrill. And I think you really need to draw people on the visuals, like, and have really strong art direction for like an action animation to have that appeal that's separate from the actual like choreography and all that stuff, because it's just because you aren't going to get that sort of benefit from it.
But oftentimes, to me, like the best animated stuff is usually the ones where they transcend that animation, where like you're not just looking at like lines on a paper on a screen, but you're actually feeling these people as characters, just like a regular film.
I mean, I think as they make 3D animation, or as animation goes on, they try to make it look more realistic. I feel uh it comes to expense as their personalities don't get as realistic. Now, I could be wrong, but like when something looks really, really realistic, a lot of the focus goes to like, oh, look how awesome this is, look how beautiful it is. Especially with Coop with the two strings, it looked amazing, but the story and the dialogue wasn't as good, and it wasn't that good. So I think that yeah, CGI is, I guess, realistic, but I mean, yeah.
I've always wondered, are we ever gonna get like an uncanny valley with animation? Like where something looks so real that it's you can't really identify with it.
I think that's
Oh,
kind of already
The
happening
Polar
now.
Express already happened.
Hmm.
Polar Express, yeah, I like that one.
Oh, to me, that's Uncanny Valley. Like that was kind of weird to watch.
It looked so much like, especially when they're not in front and like it's the snow and they're just standing in the snow. I'm not sure if it looked like it wasn't real, but up close, it was as real. But
Also, if you look at a movie like Rango, it's used a lot of CGI instead of the normal animation. But I thought, guys, that actually we should move on to a different kind of animation. I think it would be cool to talk about stop motion and just hear what you guys think about that in terms of um, what stop motion can do differently than other kinds of animation. But before we do that, Rude, you can talk about your point if you want.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention to Finrear in reference to the modern Pixar movies not being good. You have to take into account nostalgia. That's a really huge movement in your emotions, deciding whether or not a movie is good, especially in animation. You have to realize that the simple plots in movies, they're made for children, especially Disney movies, Pixar movies. The reason why the traditional classic ones like Snow White and all that, they were very new, so hand drawn was, incredible. So adults enjoyed that new vision. So it got old right after a while. So when CGI came out around Toy Story, incredibly simple plot. It was about toys. It was well liked by the general audience because it was something they had never seen before. So when you get into something like Cars 3, you're not going to like it because it's something you've already seen, but that movie is made towards children, so they're going to love it because it's something animated that they like to watch, because it's simple and easy to watch. You look at a movie like Notre Dame that had a pretty non-traditional plot, and it wasn't really liked by the general audience, even though it had a beautiful score, beautiful animation, and a good plot, but it wasn't liked. So okay, maybe good plots, maybe people like the really nice animation, but they don't like complicated plots. So then you go into The Princess and the Frog, that had a very basic plot with very gorgeous animation. Wasn't liked by the general population. So you kind of have to remember with nostalgia that the movies you're watching now aren't going to be like the ones you watched when you were a child, because you're not a child anymore. You have to kind of realize you're not Disney's target audience anymore. And in fact, The Incredibles 2 probably won't do that well because it's going to follow that same plot you've seen before. The newer audience is going to love it, yes, but you're probably only going to get maybe some nostalgia from it, but overall you're going to be left unsatisfied.
I'd like to counter New Root. I am their target demographic, and I agree. I don't really enjoy it. I think I enjoy it the same as anyone else would, because Cars 3, Cars was like one of the first movies I've ever seen, and I loved it. And as I watch it now, like, nostalgia gets to me, but it's not as it doesn't get to me. Cars 3 doesn't get to me because I only have nostalgia for the movies I've seen, not really the sequels I've seen. So I think that nostalgia doesn't really blind, especially with the original, yes, but with like sequels or prequels or spin-offs, I don't think nostalgia really blinds the actual thing.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Ruth, just before we go, because we only have 15 minutes left, guys. And I would love to talk more about the nostalgia in animation as well, and just the movies generally. But we have to move on to stop motion, just so that the people who want to talk about Isle of Dogs, for example, can't talk about that. So, Drew, you're up, man.
Oh, you're putting me in the spotlight.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that watching Isle of Dogs has just made me like admire the stop motion kind of art. So after I watched Isle of Dogs, I posted a review on my Instagram, and one of the animators from Isle of Dogs liked it and started following me on Instagram, and I looked through all her stuff, and she was actually the person who painted the freckles on Greta Gerwig's character. Every single faceplate needed the same freckles painted on that face multiple times, and just like that attention to detail, you would never notice that like the freckles change because they're all perfect. I don't know. I Love Dogs is just amazing. Every frame in that is just like I would hang on a wall. I Love Dogs gets a lot of Oscar buzz, and maybe it opens up more stop motion animation movies, because Kubo is amazing. I love Fantastic Mr. Fox, Coraline. Like I think I enjoy the stop motion animation is getting more popular. I think it's my traditional animation kind of, it sticks with me, kind of like traditional animation classic Disney did back in the day, but in the modern kind of era. It's kind of my whole spiel. Just wanted to rave about Isle of Dogs.
What about like Anomalisa, Charlie Kaufman's film?
We need more movies like that.
It was a very strange movie. I can't say I was a fan of it, but I definitely appreciated the style. It was so different and it was very unique. And even though I didn't like it, I found myself thinking about it because it creates this kind of existential crisis. And I really liked that about the movie. That was a really unique way of portraying characters. It did it really well.
Can we just talk about how beautiful Cuba and the Two Strings was?
Yes.
Yeah, that movie is gorgeous.
I mean, I can't say it's a perfect movie because the main plot and the dialogue and the acting was pretty good, but I mean,
Stop
there was
motion acting.
flaws. Voice acting,
I
but
think, yeah.
I thought that there. I mean, I don't. I think it's kind of sad. I thought there was more emotion in the puppet stop motion than there was in the people.
Wait, what are we
And
talking about now?
Cuba and Two String. We were talking about stop motion.
I
And yeah, I think that the puppets in the stop motion animation were more expressive than the actual people, and that just shows how awesome stop motion can be. So yeah.
I think like Anomalisa is probably, in my opinion, a great example of just animation in general, because it really does take the concept of something that just can't exist without it, what it is or how it's done. Because Anomalisa in no way could have been made outside of stop motion, because the entire point of it is that it is stop motion, that everything around him feels cold, not entirely alive, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah.
Like
Yeah,
like shit like that is like a creator, a filmmaker trying to make his films not in animation just because, but because he has a reason for it. Like he tries to use it in a way that he couldn't, or he tries to present the film in a way that he couldn't if he just made it in live action.
Yeah, it was initially I think it was initially like a theater performance. Like it was pretty much just like an a radio, like an audiobook in a way. Like apparently the experience was this theater, all the lights turned down. Who were the wait, hold on. Jennifer Jason Leigh, David Thewlis, and Tom Noonan were all in a table, and as like as an audience member, all you would be able to hear would be their voices. And I think Charlie Kaufman wasn't too keen on like translating that into stop motion, but he did. And I think it like actually what I love about that film is that as you know, watching it, you're aware that it is a stop like motion picture because there's a perception that all these background characters voiced by Noonan have the same face, and like it's very apparent. You can see the lines in between their eyes that kind of separate their face from like the actual model. So like the faces are meant to be replaceable, but at the same time, the protagonist, what's his name? Like Thulis's character, Michael, right? Michael Stone and Lisa like have very distinguished faces because they're
That's
very
what I'm
separate from
saying.
like anything. Yeah, yeah, I know that's what you're saying. I think at the same time, like even though I love like the exploration of animation as an art form, it doesn't make a lot of money really.
Exactly.
Kaufman was like really salty about like the box office results. I remember, and we don't really hear much. We don't really hear about animation being used in a very specific way.
Fact.
Animation, like only the technology improves, but the artistic form kind of like stagnates in a way.
You are right.
To be
See what I'm saying?
honest, Anomalisa, I mean, this is probably just me being a kid, but it kind of scared me. Like the faces are a little too realistic for me.
So do you guys think that Disney will ever do stop motion animation?
No,
Probably. Yeah.
no, I don't think they
No.
will.
Me
So let's
either.
discuss.
No way.
They already have a formula and they're gonna stick to it, like
Yeah.
Marvel does.
Okay.
And one
Yeah,
thing as
they
well.
have their phone.
They'll
Sorry.
probably do it to make money. Like I think if
Yeah.
if there's gonna be a craze.
And
And
also,
also
I'd
speaking
say
financially, they invest a lot in technology to make 3D animation, so they're not gonna stop because they want to make something stop motion. It requires a
Ju-
whole new structure for
Just
that.
what were you gonna say?
I was just going to say that I mean, one thing that's drastically changed the stop motion industry, especially when it comes to finances, is the fact of the advent of 3D printing technology. Like that's definitely cut down the cost of production of stop motion, because you know stuff like Coraline and Paranorman and stuff like that, and Kubo and Two Strings all made with 3D printing. So it also cuts down on the time as well. So maybe it's becoming more financially viable to consider stop motion animation if people haven't before.
I don't think
That's
it's the
good.
cost of stop motion animation that scares people away from it. I think it's that it doesn't make money. And, you know, with our world, people just want to make something that's quick and easy, as you can see with the Despicable Me's 500s and the Minions. I don't think that a lot of studios want to dabble in it just because it doesn't make them money.
So what about, for example, a movie
Despicable Me
like
wasn't too bad.
Mantis? Sorry. What about a movie like the Lego movie, for example, which is not stop motion, I know, but it's made as if it was. What about using that technique?
I feel it. I don't know. For me, that's
What
kind
movie?
of scary because then at some point that technology is going to get so good where you don't know that it's not stop motion, where it looks Lego movie looks almost real to me, like it was fully stop motion, but you know, they used Bricker or whatever the program is. Hopefully that real stop motion animation doesn't go away because I kind of admire it, but I also understand that it's costly. But I don't know. Other people's opinions.
Jiru, what they did is they animated it regularly and then they slowed it down to make it sane, I believe. Like it's there. It's out of Legos.
Yeah. And I don't know, like I'd say that stop motion isn't always super costly. Like I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of how that is, but like, you know, for instance, we have Aardman Studios here, and they recently did I forget what it's called, but it's Early Man or something here. It came out and it's like, you know, less than quarter the budget of like, you know, Disney and other like big 3D animation films, even though it's stop motion. And a lot of that, I mean, it comes down to, you know, maybe not opting for the biggest voice actors, stars, and all that stuff. It has less prestige. But yeah, there's definitely a way to do like a pretty, you know, all guns blazing kind of stop motion animation for pretty small budget. But yeah, it's just interesting how we don't see it more often.
All right, with that point, I'd just like to cut you off, guys, because we've got less than 5 minutes left. And I wanted to ask you just a final question in terms of what do you want to see in the future of animation, technology-wise, but also just what do you think could be possible?
I think we should have more animated porn.
I think
we probably should.
animated movies should take more risks.
We
More
should
risks.
have porn with more niggers.
Oh, okay.
Oh my.
Alrighty then.
There you go.
Great.
He's gone. So what do you think, guys? Because
Yeah.
I mean, technology makes a lot of new things able. Like, what about animation where you can have virtual reality while you watch the movie?
Hybrid?
So virtual reality movie.
Maybe using that as like you don't watch as an audience, you watch from that person's perspective, as in like, and maybe
First person?
as first person as from someone's perspective, and maybe if maybe in the future it could be like a video game, but it's a movie.
Hardcore Henry.
Yeah, but like that, except you it'll like except you're like in a chair type of thing, and it like moves
4D.
you. Yeah, no, technically the 4D is a sniff. You can smell it.
Sniff, smell.
Oh, that was only for Spy Kids all the time. Though.
Yeah, but I guess it would be 5D.
The thing is, it's actually starting to become possible to be inside of a movie and choose where to look during the action. It's not that far off, and it's actually going to be possible. Which means you would be able to sit in the cinema, and everyone at the cinema would be able to have different angles watching the movie, which is interesting and very different from what we think of movies today.
Like a reality show.
It could be an action movie. It doesn't. It can be an animated movie.
It could be like in a. I'm not sure if you guys like one of those things where you sit down and you look up and like the whole ceiling, like an astronomy, or I think that's what you call it.
I'd like to see. You can
Sorry.
go.
Okay. I was gonna say that I did experience a VR film. There's this New Zealand crime thriller kind of drama, and it was every scene was shot with a 360 camera. And honestly, I think it's way more suited to gaming, where you are the interactive force that's determining what's happening. Whereas when you're in someone else's vision, you don't know what's intended to be seen or what to focus on, and it's really stressful. You're just like looking, your head's on a swivel, just constantly looking in every direction. You're like, okay, what am I supposed to be paying attention to, and stuff like that. So I don't know, maybe that's just a barrier we need to get over, but I found it really not the most immersive thing. It was just stressful to experience.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I'd like to see the technologies of how they're going to use 3D to kind of like how is it going to look, because I think Coco had some backgrounds that looked almost real with like the depth of field effects that Pixar made, and I wonder how real they're going to get for animation. Like are these just going to look like the SpongeBob movie where the animated characters look like animated characters but the entire background looks real?
Jumanji.
Well, the Jungle Book did that.
Yeah. I'm wondering how far they'll go with that type of stuff, because I think at that point, then why aren't you just making it live action? Or maybe live action movies are all going to become computer animated. I don't know. Now I'm really confused.
It's going to be interesting. We're going to see that very evidently with how The Lion King is adapted into live action, because that is animation. And they did it with The Jungle Book, like someone just said. So, I mean, it's going to be a strange transition. It has been, and it's going to keep evolving.
Is this something that, I don't know, you guys are into? Like what Disney's doing with remaking animated movies, live action, and trying to force their kind of perspective in that way?
It's not too bad. Like the Jungle Book was, it was visually pleasing, but like Beauty and the Beast sucked. Maleficent was bleh. Like I mean,
I agree. You with Mantis, yeah. I didn't really. And Beauty and the Beast was fine. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't very good. And yeah, obviously Maleficent was not good. I did. And they did a great job with the Jungle Book visually. Yes, I mean it got it nominations even. So it was really pretty, but it's just a very weird direction.
I mean, going back to the topic of realism, because we know Disney has the technology right now, as we saw it in Coco and what was the other one, Jungle Book. So they can make realistic scenery, but do they really want to? Because there is a market for animated movies. Like some people, if they want to watch a realistic movie, they will go and watch a movie that was made a live action movie. So I don't know if they really going to push it that far to make it that realistic, because sometimes people don't want to see that. They just want to see something with saturation of color, something that really feels animated, because as someone said, there's a nostalgia thing of watching this animated flicks that it makes you feel like a kid. But when you watch a live action movie, you just feel like you're in the real world.
All right. With that note, guys, we're gonna have to stop the roundtable. I mean, just thank you so much, everyone, for showing up. Thank you for the staff for moderating the channel. That's great. Just thank you for that, and thank you for everyone who contributed. Everyone at Twitch. I'm just gonna leave it to Drew, and he's gonna close the discussion. Thank you so much, guys.
but
Thank you guys.
Yeah,
No
cheers. This was
problem.
fun.
All right. I think it's good. He's closing out the live stream. Thanks, guys, for joining. You can stay. You can go to the general chat if you want. You can keep talking. But this was for the official roundtable, and the stream is going to be closed now.